Hello again, I'm Pia Chattopadhyay, and you're listening to the Friday edition of The Current.
This is about the role she played around 4 dead Americans when it seems to be that the story coming out of the administration, and she's the point person, is so disconnected to reality, I don't trust her. And the reason I don't trust her is because I think she knew better, and if she didn't know better, she shouldn't be the voice of America. I don't think she deserves to be promoted. There are a lot of qualified people in this country the president could pick, but I am dead set on making sure we don't promote anybody that was an essential player in the Benghazi debacle.
Well, that was South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham laying into the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice. Many Republicans believe Rice should not be considered a candidate to replace Hillary Clinton as U.S. Secretary of State. And as you heard, it's because of comments Rice made following the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya. Republicans say Rice misled Americans by categorizing it as a violent protest and not a terrorist attack. Now, Rice seems to have another headache, and this time the concerns come from those who might typically be seen as her political allies, and there's a strong Canadian connection. Bob Deans is the Associate Director of Communications for the Natural Resources Defense Council, and we've reached him this morning in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Pia, for having me.
Well, your publication, On Earth, broke the other Susan Rice story, if I can call it that, this week. What did you find out about the relationship between Susan Rice and the Keystone XL pipeline?
Well, what we found was that Susan Rice, Ambassador Rice, and her husband, who are worth somewhere between $25 and $43 million between the two of them, have substantial holdings in TransCanada, as well as Enbridge and some of the banks that would fund some of the tar sands development and the pipeline. And when you total it all up, it comes to somewhere north, Pia, of $5 million. So it's a substantial amount of stock. And it's very important that the State Department be able to render a thorough, fair, and transparent review of the Keystone pipeline. It is, after all, the State Department that has primary responsibility for deciding whether that pipeline is in the national interest. And the public needs to have full confidence in that process and in the outcome of it. Go ahead. No, it was disturbing for us to learn that one of our most able and respected diplomats had a financial stake in the outcome of that decision, and we would expect her to fully divest herself of any holdings that could present even the appearance of a conflict of interest if she is, in fact, to become Secretary of State.
How did the information come to you?
Well, one of the activist organizations that has been opposing the pipeline tipped off On Earth magazine, which, believe it or not, it's interesting, the discussion you were just having, Pia. On Earth is an independent journalistic operation that NRDC operates. We did not coordinate that with our policy people here in Washington. The On Earth magazine itself operates independently of that. And so they looked at public records, Pia. There's an organization here, a nonprofit in Washington called the Center for Responsive Politics, and they list these kinds of holdings that have been disclosed by the official themselves. In other words, Ambassador Rice, when she became our ambassador to the United Nations, she provided for the public, disclosed these holdings, and the Center for Responsive Politics put it up on their website, and that's where we got our information.
So she has disclosed. We contacted Ambassador Rice's office at the United Nations, and they sent us this statement. They said, Ambassador Rice has complied with annual financial disclosure and applicable ethics requirements aimed at assessing conflicts of interest related to her service in the U.S. government. Okay, so she's disclosed, the public knows about them, and if she does get confirmed as Secretary of State, Is that not enough? Doesn't that make it all above board?
There are specific requirements for Secretary of State, for an official at that level, to divest themselves of certain holdings and investments, and I expect these would fall within that category. But let me say this, Pia. And again, it's similar to what you were just talking about, but there are legal requirements, there are ethical requirements, and then there is the public perception, or what you might call the appearance of propriety. It is so important that the public have confidence in this. in the review of the Keystone pipeline, because this pipeline, we believe, poses a real threat to our climate, to our air, to our water, to our farms, our communities, our ranches. We think that a thorough review will find this pipeline to not be in our national interest. Whatever the outcome is, we need to have confidence that it was performed at the highest of all standards. And so appearances matter.
Susan Rice is under a concerted attack right now from the Republicans over what happened in Benghazi, Libya. To what extent are you helping to undermine her by publicizing the information about her financial links to XL now?
Well, we have enormous respect for Ambassador Rice. She served in the Clinton administration. She was on the National Security Council. She was an Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs there. She is a Rhodes Scholar, a very, very accomplished woman on many levels. Our concern, and our sole concern with respect to Ambassador Rice, is that she be in a position to oversee a complete and transparent review of the Keystone proposal if, in fact, she's nominated and is approved to be the Secretary of State.
What if she says she'll just recuse herself from any pipeline decision or pipeline vote or pipeline discussion, but keeps her investments? Would that be enough for you?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think it'd be tricky, though, Pia, because the Secretary of State has sort of first-line overview of that process, and if the Secretary of State is not able to reach an agreement that other bureaus in the federal government concur with, then it gets kicked up to the White House. The reality is it's probably a political decision that will be made by the White House anyway. It will probably end up on the president's desk as it did before. But we would like to see a nice, clean process here, and we certainly hope Ambassador Rice, with all the credits to her career, that wouldn't be marred by this.
Just briefly, if she does refuse to divest her holdings in these companies, will you publicly oppose her nomination as Secretary of State?
We're certainly not there, Pia. We are focused on the Keystone project itself and the threat that it would pose to our future, and that's where we're going to continue to focus on.
Bob Deans, thank you for
into that fray.
Thank you for talking with us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Pia.
Bob Deans is the Associate Director of Communications for the Natural Resources Defense Council, and we reached him this morning in Washington, D.C.